Good morning again.
Good morning.
So it's interesting how I've shared how my talks come to me, and they just come through me, and I often don't know what they are until I'm on my way here. So I was at a workshop yesterday, and one of the things that came up for me a lot was judgment, judging myself, and I'm a very harsh critic of myself. I'm better now. I don't judge myself as harshly as I used to, and I'm learning how to be more compassionate with myself. And then I've been watching this movie about J.D. Salinger, who wrote Catcher in the Rye. And I was watching a portion of it this morning as I was finishing my breakfast, and there was a scene between J.D. Salinger and his father. And so then another part of me says, okay, we are going to talk about my relationship with my father. And in this particular scene, J.D. Salinger, who really didn't like promotion and was unhappy with the things that came with being published. And so Catcher in the Rye had just come out, and there's all this critical acclaim, and he's getting very famous. And he was actually out walking in the park one night, and there's a gentleman there who appeared to maybe have been homeless, said to him that I am Holden Caulfield, the character in that book. And it really disturbed J.D. Salinger, so when he got home, he was at his father's house. He went back to his father's house, and his father saw him, and his father said, I really didn't think, he said, first I didn't think you'd be able to support yourself as a writer. His father was very critical of him as a writer and did not want him to be a writer because he didn't think he'd make a living. He really didn't. He didn't think he had any talent, and really he didn't care if he was talented because he thought he just needed to get a good job. And he had a business. The father had a business. He wanted his son to carry on in that business. So there was quite a bit of conflict between father and son there. And then after J.D. Salinger comes home that night, after he felt being accosted by this gentleman, his father said, you know, now I have to worry about you being accosted by fans who may not be in their right mind. And J.D. said, I didn't think you ever worried about me. And his father said, I've worried about you since the moment you were born. And you can see the look on J.D. Salinger's face, like this recognition, like, I didn't know that. And then his father goes on to explain that he was a very talented pianist. And his father did not want him to be a musician. And so he stopped playing piano and never picked it up again. And J.D. said, I didn't know. He said, I've never heard you play piano. He said, I know, because I won't play it. He said, I stopped because of my father. And so his father looked at him and said, you are very talented, just like your mother said. And you should write. And that was a moment for the two of them. So then I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm finishing my breakfast, the tears are rolling. I'm thinking about my dad and my relationship with him and some of the moments we had together. And then this thing about judgment in my relationship with my father all came together. Because my early experience with my father was his judgment of me. And my father drove me hard. He did. I mean, he was always on me about doing better. And excellence was my father's thing. Be excellent at whatever you do. And I remember him saying, I don't care if you sweep floors for a living. You be the best floor sweeper ever. And he always said things like that to me. But my young mind always interpreted that as that I wasn't good enough. And so I carried this I'm not good enough message and this message of judgment for decades. For decades. So it took me in my evolution with my relationship with my father to realize he was just loving me the way that he knew to love me. And this, oh gosh, so I came in pretty teary-eyed because I'm thinking of all this, and I read a story I wrote about my father and an experience we had together when he was actually very close to the time when he passed away, and I bathed him. And it was just a phenomenal experience for the two of us. It really was. And I don't know if you've ever bathed anyone, but it is an act of pure love. It really is. So I'm reading this story and getting reacquainted with that experience I had with my dad, and the two of us really came together where judgment at its highest, so the power of judgment, because that's one of the 12 powers of man, which is wisdom, which is right judgment, which is judgment from our God self, our God expression. And so my father and I, our relationship got to that sacred communion of wisdom and love together, judgment and love, where we really began to see each other clearly and with a God expression and from the expression of God. And that song, so I really thought, okay, I'm going to get through service okay, and it's fine. And then we had the first song, In My Father's World. Is that the name of it?
This is
My Father's World. And then we got to the Clapton song, In My Father's Eyes. And my father had the prettiest light brown eyes. And when I walked in the room, his eyes sparkled. And all was right with the world. No matter what transpired up to that moment, I felt loved and cherished and protected. And I was his little girl again. So at times when, as an adult woman, I needed to be somebody's little girl again. In some moments, when you're just tired of being an adult. Sometimes I have those every other day. And you just want to be enveloped in that kind of love. And my father and I got to that with each other probably several years before he passed. So probably our last 15 years together was that kind of an experience. So, and it helped me to heal this thing about judgment in its most difficult human side, which is all about, are you measuring up? And how do you compare with everyone else? And when love and wisdom are joined together in that sacred communion, then judgment becomes wisdom. And all the things that we need to see rightly become right. Right in divine mind, in God mind. So, this journey we have through life with thinking about who we are and then wanting to speak that into the world. Last week we talked about integrity and whether or not what we say and do is in integrity with what we say we believe in and what we affirm in life. So we may affirm it from a mental side, but are we affirming it from our hearts and from our words and into life? And it was my father who taught me about integrity and walking the talk and doing what you're supposed to do even when no one is watching. that you are the watcher. And for some, God is the watcher. Because for many, what we grow up in our thoughts about God was God as Father. And that's a positive thing if your experience with your father was positive, with your human father. But if it wasn't, then that was problematic. My mother didn't do well with the God as Father analogy because she didn't know her father. And he wasn't present in her life. And so that took a lot of healing for her. And I don't know that she ever really healed it. She came a long way over life through her 80-some years, 84 years. You know, sometimes we struggle with things for a very long time. And it may take decades for things to heal completely. And maybe we just get to another level of it. Maybe it doesn't heal completely. Maybe there are some things that we still struggle and need to progress with through life. I'm feeling today like I don't have a lot of answers. And maybe, I don't know that we come together for answers all the time. I just hope that we feel something when we're together, that you think of something else or something in a new way when we're together. So this whole thing about judgment and love, wisdom and love, wisdom might be the easier word to swallow other than judgment. Because I think we do go to a negative place sometimes when we think of judgment. I certainly do. So actually the workshop I was in yesterday with Carol Dixon Carr facilitated that. She was the creator of that. And so my insight during that workshop yesterday was that in my moments when I'm judging myself harshly, I need to remember that there are a lot of things that I'm doing now that I never dreamed I'd do, including standing before you and being a spiritual leader, but that feel at home. And that obviously it was all within me. Someplace I didn't know. And that feels at home, so that new things that I want to venture into from here can also feel at home. Because they too, if I'm called to it, are within me. It's all within us. And so when we think about judgment as one of the powers of man, or any of the other 11 powers, our job is to remember it's here. And more than that it is us. Remember, we don't have the power, we are the power. We are the God expression. We are the sacred communion of love and wisdom. And even when we're not showing up as that, we get to choose it and be that and express it. And the other thing that came up for me this week is that gap between I know I am it, but I'm not yet expressing it. That feeling that I might be falling short, or I'm about to fall short of my divine self. And you know when you're at that crossroads, and it can either go really right, or it could really go wrong. And you're standing there in the gap. And you can go either way. And I know know there are days when I've tried to straddle the gap. Be a little right. But still try to get part of that little bit of wrong in there, because a part of me wants to feel better. The human side of me wants to feel better, because I feel that's justice or judgment. Straddling the gap is painful. Probably literally and figuratively. That's the thing. And it's not pretty. Gosh, my father he was just there. It seemed like at times when I was really trying to straddle that gap, and told me and was just very vocal about what I should do. And of course I didn't want to hear it. And most of the times he was right. A lot of the times I didn't like the delivery of the message. But I was being steered in the right direction. And if we are really in tune with our wisdom, the wisdom that we are, we will go in the right direction, as dictated by right judgment and wisdom. And much to my dismay sometimes in the direction my father was trying to get me to go. Right? And so we're always at choice. In the gap is the big choice, no matter what it is that's before us. And then we get to be who we are in that moment. We show ourselves who we are. We show the world who we are. We show the person that is before us who we are, even if it's just us looking in the mirror. Usually my battle with judgment is that I'm looking at myself in the mirror, literally or figuratively, and trying to decide what I'm going to do or how I'm judging myself. And have I judged myself rightly as God expression or as something else? My father is so much a part of who I am. You know, my grandmother, his mother, gave me the money to move out of the house. Because I remember her looking at me and saying, "You and your father are so much alike. I'm afraid you're going to kill each other." Because we battled in my adolescence like you would not believe. You know, and I never thought we'd get to where we were in the years before he died. Never thought that was possible. But it reminds me that we can be our best selves at some point, whether it's within a few seconds of knowing you've got a choice to make and you're in the gap, or if it's 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. The time lapse doesn't matter. All that matters is that you get there. It's all that matters is that you get there to the recognition that you are God in expression, or that this moment is perfect, or that the situation that I'm in is perfection. Remember that unconditional love of life that we talk about often? That unconditional love of another, of ourselves. Yeah. I don't know if any of this is coming together into a comprehensive talk, but because it's just in its moment, which is, if I'm going to practice unconditional love of life, then this is perfection too, right? I hate when that happens. So yes, I'm grateful that I was taken back to that story about my father and I. I actually gave a copy of it for Rita and Eddie, for Reba and Eddie, but I think I'll bring a copy to each of you next week if you'd like to have a copy of it. It really is talks about the labor of love and what's possible for relationships and how love can express itself at times and how our connections with each other are so vital, and that there are times when we're called to save each other. There are times when our roles have to reverse. The traditional roles, whether it's parent and child, husband and wife, friends sometimes. Carol and I are great friends. We've been friends for years. There are times when she's saving me, and there's times when I'm saving her. So sometimes, there's this give and take. And there's a whole lot of grace to be found when you're open to the switch. Whether it's for a few moments, a few days, a few hours, or a few years. Life shifts. And we're caught unawares sometimes, or it wasn't something we planned, right? And then we're in that gap again. Am I going to love life where I am? Can I love life where I am? So the answer is can you is yes. But then there's will you. Yes. There's the road. My father was a teacher also, and so he was always, I always got grammar lessons at any point in the day. And so when I would ask my father, Dad, can you do this for me? He would say, I can, but will I? It's something else. I'm thinking, here go those lessons again. Yeah. So in the gap, the answer to can I is yes. We can be love. We can be wisdom. But will you? Will you? I often ask myself, will I? At any moment. After I, saw that portion of that movie this morning, I thought, I don't want to talk about my father this morning. I don't want to feel this again, because the grief comes up. I really hadn't thought, it was Father's Day, I knew that, but when I woke up, I hadn't really, my father wasn't top of mind. And then, bam, as grief does to us, sneaks up on you. Just watching a movie, fixing my oatmeal again, and everything changes. And then I knew that yes, if I'm going to talk about judgment, I need to talk about my father as well. And that whole mixed bag of that relationship, and what that brought to me, and what that gave me, and what it taught me that I still carry. And so yes, I wish I could look into my father's eyes today. And maybe I still can. In my heart of hearts. I think that's the hardest thing about losing somebody and not having the physical to hold on to, and having to shift to the remembrance or some other kind of connection with them, the heart the spirit connection of them, or maybe a different iteration of them. Quentin's father, my father-in-law, is father to me. This man is father to me. So it's another choice. That's another choice. Do we want to be open to the next iteration of love from somebody? Or experience of somebody we've lost?